Heidi, is it Heidi Haas? Is that how you pronounce your last name? Heidi Haas.
It is. Yep. Yep.
Doing Power Network TV. I'm excited you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm kind of excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah,
For real. I watched all the other interviews on the channel and so nice to be here.
okay, well, great. We love having you. And I've gotten to know a little bit about you through Shelley, but we were just talking about taking the next step and what that's like. Your son is currently taking the next step to go and visit, and you're in the process of taking the next step in, we were just talking about your TEDx talk you did, and
Yeah.
kind of getting people commenting and messaging you, reaching out because they're looking for the next step. They're looking for help. And
Yeah.
your own process, what does that look like to you? Because that can feel like a quagmire when we're like, what step am I on?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to move by feel and by instinct. And I've learned as I grow into myself, I guess, to trust that. I used to, when I was younger, I was really anxious about trying to, understand what I was doing and why, and being able to explain that to everyone else. And, right now I kind of feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I'm supposed to be here, and I know I'm supposed to start working on this again. Like it feels right. And it feels like I should be, or not should, as Mickey says, don't should on myself. But I feel like I'm ready. There's a lot of stuff that's been brewing in my head for 10 plus years probably, and experience with raising my own kids and being able to, there's something I really appreciate about, my eldest is 25 years old now, and I can actually look and see the result of some of that parenting art of seeing, okay, what did I do? And I didn't know if I knew what I was doing back then, but here's the things that turned out, and here's the things that maybe didn't turn out so well. But you can actually see some of the result, and there's a certain confidence that I think comes with that. It does for me anyways, that I can go, okay, I did those. I actually did make those choices right. I didn't know why I was making those choices, but those were the right choices for us. I spent a lot of time working on our relationship and the attachment, and I let a lot of other stuff go, including, I had to let my career go at a point. I had to walk away from public schools because my kids, my elder two, both had a year of school refusal and saying, no, I can't do this anymore. I can't go there anymore. And I had to trust to take them out. Sorry, my dog's barking. To take them out of school and to trust that we were going to figure this out, because, there's all these voices all over the place saying, you're damaging your kids. You're going to make their anxiety worse. I had one principal saying, like 84% of kids who, take a year off in high school never come back. And, this was going to be this horrible thing. And, at that point, it was just really scary. And, I've learned from then, and I have a lot more confidence. And, there's that, you walk through it, and perhaps there's things that you can share with the people walking the path behind you that's going to help. And that's where I'd like to be. I've been writing a book for 10 years. I did my TED Talk 8 years ago. A lot of stuff happened in between there where I had to step away from what I was doing, but now I feel like I'm ready for that next step.
And you talked about learning to not be so maybe rigid, but to go with the feel. Does this feel right? How did you learn that? What do you mean by it? And how did you learn it?
That's a really good question. I mean, I have to say my eldest taught me so much about myself and being, trusting in sometimes trusting in what I felt I needed to do, or sometimes when I didn't trust myself, at least knowing what not to do. When she's about 2 years old, there was a day, I was working in the IT department of the Ministry of Attorney General here in BC. And so regular hours downtown, having to take the SkyTrain, dropping her off at daycare. And there was one day where the daycare was, I think the lady who ran it had to get some medical tests done. And so she had to take the day off. And I went, okay, that's it. I'm going to get my daughter. I'm going to take the day off work. We're going to have a nice day because this is our opportunity, right? I'm working. I don't get to spend much time with her. This is going to be your day. So it was a nice, spring, early summer day. I had brought her bathing suit. We came across a wading pool in one of the local parks around here. And I was like, okay, going to change her into her bathing suit. And she refused, just flat out refused, would not let me take off her, to help her change. And, I'm like battling her and I'm like, just determined, like, no, we're going to have a nice day. We're having a nice day. Let's do the bathing suit. And she wouldn't change. And I ended up giving her a smack on the bottom and she ended up in tears. And I looked at her and I ended up tears. And we're sitting there. And the thought that crossed my mind was, I can't do this. I can't do this to her because she needs something different from me. She doesn't need me being my parents or any other generation of parents. I mean, I don't want to diss. Everyone does the best that they can in their situations. And my parents came from war. They were both German. They went through a lot of stuff. They did the best they could. But I looked at it and went, I don't want to be my parents. I don't want to do this damage to her. And that was one of those moments where I just went, okay, I don't know what to do, but I'm not going to do that. And so I started to just pay attention to her a lot more. And then I had 2 boys after that. So I've got 3 kids and really listening to them, paying attention to them. I wanted to make sure that they got to be who they are, not who I wanted them to be, not who schools wanted them to be, not anything else, but who they are. And so I asked a lot of questions and I took their lead from them. And I look at it and I feel like I had no choice. Like I do know that I had a choice theoretically, but in my heart, I had no choice but to adjust to them and learn together and question myself and always try to be better. And so it's just, I've learned that in work, in my personal life, there's just so much, I appreciate a lot of Richard's talk the other day of just that trusting, finding those, what is me and what is other people. And I think my life has been a progression of learning what is me and trusting that. And my kids have helped because they push back. I gave them permission to sort of sit there and go, Mom, you're doing what you told us not to do. And I'm like, you're right. I have to adjust. So they gave me feedback. I learned from them. They learned from me. And a lot of that was just by feel. Only in hindsight do I kind of go, oh, that was a really good choice.
So you've learned because you had to learn, because you felt like you had to learn to navigate life, not from a rules system approach that was handed down by people that were in survival mode. And so they needed rules and systems in survival. Fair enough. But now you're in a different type of environment. So you had to come up with a different playbook and you had to take flack for it.
Oh, yeah.
So what's that process been like living outside the box? Because you've been doing that in many ways, maybe it sounds like.
Yeah. I've noticed when I look back, I really went from, and actually I see my kids doing some similar kind of things, that starting with, sort of just pushing back and pushing everyone and everything out, right? Like I felt very distanced from my own family, from my ex-husband's side, from the grandparents and that side, and is sort of having to push back and push people out first. And so it was just me and my kids, and so it was just us. We didn't have a lot of support. That was hard sometimes, for sure, because I have complex kids, they have complex needs. School has not been easy, work has not been easy, the money hasn't been easy. You kind of, there's a lot of struggle in there, but I pushed everyone out first. And I think it was because I needed to create room for me to figure out who I am and to practice that. It's kind of like, when you pull that out, it's like this raw little piece of your heart, I think. And trying to be around people and protect that was too hard. So I felt like I pushed everyone away. I feel very grateful and very lucky that we found a school locally here. I went through a time where both of my eldest had a year of absolutely refusing to go to school. Like they said to me, can't do it. And so I let them stay home. And then at the end of the second year of that happening, it happened 2 consecutive years, I looked around and a friend of mine mentioned a school that was local here. And it was they called them the self-directed democratic unschooling. I'm not sure if you've heard that, but it's much more about kids and kids directing their learning and going and learning from their passions, and the adults in their lives help to bring in resources and opportunities and learning and tying things together sometimes, but it's not an adult directing a child what to learn. It's the kids really choosing what they want to learn. And there was a lot of focus on relationships and building, emotional intelligence and, just a lot of those skills that are very, very, very healthy, relationship and negotiation and what a democratic process looks like and how to resolve problems. But when I found that school, I walked into one of the first parent meetings. They had sort of regular evening parent meetings. And I realized that I had my armor up and I was ready to defend myself. And I was ready to defend my way of parenting and why I had made the decisions that I had and why I had taken them out of school. And because I had always had to do that in the regular school system. And I'd had to do that with my kid's dad and just in a lot of situations with family, friends. And I walked into that first meeting and I didn't have to explain. Everyone was like, oh yeah, we get it. We made that decision too. Or, there's some people that were ahead in the journey and some people that were, at more the beginning of that journey, but everyone was like, yeah, of course you made that decision. And it was the biggest weight that just fell off of me that I went, oh, okay. Here's a group of people who get me and what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do that. And I don't have to explain myself 5 ways to Sunday to try to justify what I'm doing. And I think that's one of the biggest turning points for me, was just realizing that, okay, I can be me, I can support my kids, and I don't need to defend that. And these people are here to support me. And they're still in my life. And I cherish those people. And the school has since closed, unfortunately. Budget problems and just the struggles with the public system. But that community is still there. And as soon as I see one of them, or, we get together, or, right away, and there's just this comfort, right? It's changed my life and my kids' lives.
It's that coming home when you
Yeah.
come home to your tribe. It's comfort. Like you said, it's comfort. Changes your life. You're like, oh, I can take some of this armor off. It's kind of heavy.
Yeah. Although, right? Yeah. Most definitely. It was coming home to a home that I never even knew as a child, right? Like it was never that. Like I was always on edge and, trying to make sure that everybody was okay and very, very skilled at people pleasing.
Yeah.
As a kid. So I've never.
Heidi, can you still hear me? I'm having an issue
There we
with
go.
connection. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
saying, yeah, the people pleasing, that was your norm, the people pleasing and
Oh
the
yeah.
making sure
And I was
every,
very good at it.
yeah, okay. You became really good at
Yeah.
surviving. Yeah.
Well, and my kids kind of roll their eyes because, I loved school. I loved it. And it was so easy to figure out what my teachers wanted and to provide that and to get all of this, positive feedback. Um, and I love learning. I've always loved learning. So I would just lose myself in learning things, and it ended up being, all these pats on the back. So it was a positive place for me. It was not for my kids, but it was for me in probably all the worst ways. Not
Hmm.
all the worst. The downside of it was I don't think there was anyone ever who went, stop trying to figure out what I want. What do you want? Like, no one asked me who I was in back then, because I was so good at being what they needed and wanted. And I think that's what the system tries to do. It was something that my kids couldn't do. And that's where we got to that point with the school refusal, where I had supported them to be themselves, and the school wanted them to be a good student, and that wasn't who they were. And so that's where a lot of struggle came from, unfortunately.
I know it must have been a lot to your kids because my mom defended me once that I found out later at school because whatever. And just
Mhm.
to know that my mom defended me, just to know that she went in there swinging verbally, and just to know, to see how angry she was trying to advocate for me, it meant a lot to my heart. So your
Yeah.
kids must, I just would assume your kids really would know that their mama's got their back, and that's a big
I,
deal.
I think I think so. I think that is something that's we have some pretty great relationships.
Hmm.
And that's the foundation for it, was that, they knew I was in their corner. They knew that they could call me. They knew they could rely on me. I'm not perfect by any means. And I think I think being able to look back, especially with my eldest, I can see how, I was a very different parent, 7 years later with my youngest than I was with my eldest. Because, they're your practice kid. You're trying to figure out what you're doing and who you are and everything else, and you make
Oh,
mistakes. But
true.
we've even been able to have conversations, and I think there are some really healing conversations that you can have even with your adult kids. I go, you know what? When I did that when you were a kid, I messed up. I should not have done that. Like, I've had those conversations with my eldest, with my daughter. And, she was like, yeah, you were a different parent back then. Like, I get you're a different person now, but you were different back then. I'm like, I am sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I'd done better. And that means that is healing, even when they're adults. I don't think that you have to go, okay, well, the damage is done. I think that you can have those conversations
Oh,
and do better.
well, yeah, that as a society, we're going through that. That's why there's such a swing. It's because we've put emotions down and feelings down and trampled on all sorts of things. And now now the pendulum's been swung probably too far. But the good side is that we're honoring emotions and we're honoring
Yeah.
feelings and we have to make reparation where we can for what we've done to
Yeah.
ourselves, to each other, yeah, it's so what's on your game plan? What does 2023 have for you, Heidi? Going into 2024, what are you thinking about?
Well, I I am, I guess, just coming up to 5 years post a stage 4 colorectal cancer diagnosis, and so far so good. I had an excellent oncology team, and we hit it hard. And I have some physical, and health difficulties with the after effects of the treatments, chemotherapy and radiation and everything. But I'm knock wood. I'm feeling pretty good, and I've had 2 years off chemo now, and feeling better. And in that time, my youngest also had leukemia, and we were in Children's Hospital. So he was diagnosed right before the pandemic started, January 2020. Had a bone marrow transplant. So we've had all of this stuff where I feel like we were just absolutely head down. How do we get from one day to the next day? I mean, sometimes 1 minute to the next minute, honestly. And I feel like I'm scared to say it because I don't want to tempt fate, but I feel like we're sort of coming out of that a little bit. Both my son and I have had, everything's sort of been stable. We're doing okay. And, I'm working with Shelley now. That's been a fantastic thing. Found the Empower Network. And I feel like that's another one of these communities that is like-minded and going to be supportive. And so I'm kind of excited about getting back to some things that I started about 8 to 10 years ago. So I'd had some time, working with the school system and just my own personal work at that time, that I'd been doing a lot of advocacy for what I'd prefer to call a neuro-intense brain. I mean, kids in particular, because it had to do with the education system. But though I'm learning, and probably a lot of people who are here in the Empower Network can probably relate, that there's sort of the gifted, highly creative, highly sensitive. There's a lot of crossover with ADHD, autism, where it's these, your brain is just more intense. There's a researcher named Dabrowski who talked about overexcitabilities. He worked with mostly highly artistic and creative patients. But he identified 5 areas of what he called overexcitability, and its intensity. So what those were was psychomotor. So this is sort of the ADHD. It's like constant moving, fast talking, very physically, having to be physically active. Like my eldest needs to work out hard. She's actually training as a firefighter. And that really works for her, because that physical, having that physical outlet actually burns the anxious energy and the emotional energy for her. So she needs the physical. So she's got that psychomotor. The next is sensual, which is sensory. Is literally like, okay, the tag on my shirt is going to drive me crazy. Textures of foods, smells, again, the touch, like I can't remember, from the earliest memory to go clothes shopping. I walked along and just touched things until I went, oh, that's nice. Do I like it? No. Okay. Move on. Right. Like I didn't look at the style. I didn't look at the color. I just went by, how does it feel first? So there's a sensual, intellectual. So this is the typical, what you would consider the gifted child, that, you've done the IQ test. By the rules, I think here in BC, it's if you're in the 98th percentile or above in your age bracket, then you're classified as gifted. But that's like an intellectual overexcitability or intensity where, I have to know. Like my kids laugh because my mom actually bought me an entire set of Encyclopedia Britannica when I was a kid. And the way that they browse the internet, I sat on the floor and flipped through these encyclopedias, right? Because I was curious and I wanted to know things, or, honestly, I read the dictionary sometimes. Yeah, I know, geek, totally geek. I get it. But that's that intellectual. It's a thirst for knowledge. It's wanting to know, it's wanting to learn, it's solve problems. The fourth one is imaginational. So that's the creative. And that's very much the problem solving. It's seeing connections where others perhaps don't, making, cognitive leaps, and being able to see how these two things are similar, and therefore what I can learn from that, or how I could put those together. Or so imaginational. And then there's emotional intensity of just feeling things deeply, feeling the woes of the world, and it's all too much. And there are some topics of conversation that are just kind of, okay, we just don't talk about them in our house because I can't do anything about it. It's really hard for my eldest, my daughter, to talk about the state of the planet, because she's just like, okay, if I think about that too much, then it's like, what's the point? It's just this emotional intensity. And so really looking at, I was in a place where I think I mentioned I did a TEDx talk. I get a lot of people who reach out to me from that. And it was about sort of the gifted child and what that looks like in education, and how to honor that. And what that development looks like. And I really want to take that further. I want to be able to, gifted in the school systems, the way that school systems, when the budgets get cut, quite often it's like, okay, the smart kids will be fine. So they're a little bit bored, but they'll be fine. We're going to cut their programs because here are these other kids who need it much more. And because of that kind of triage, a lot of gifted programs and even gifted some of the courses at a university level for teachers have been cut. Like there's no gifted expert at the University of British Columbia at this point, because it just has fallen off of everyone's radar. And unfortunately, I think that it's not, they're just going to be fine. The gifted kids, and the more gifted, the more intense it is, are suffering. They are underachieving. Like, it's not, gifted is not the kid who's getting straight A's. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. It's the kid who doesn't feel like they fit in. They know they don't fit in. It causes all sorts of emotional problems. There's a lot of, I think, anxiety, suicidal ideation, existential crisis that happens, not feeling known. And we need the gifted kids in our communities to be our leaders and to know themselves and to be able to function and help, because a lot of the problems in this world are, we've already solved the low-hanging fruit. We figured out how to build roads, and we figured out how to build skyscrapers, and we figured out how to build companies, but we haven't figured out how to get along yet. We haven't figured out some of the more complex things, like how to save our planet. And I think we need those people to come together, to be honored, to be recognized, to feel like, sometimes I get messages, the ones that touch me the most are the ones that I get from, like, sometimes as young as grade 5 kids who have watched my TED Talk and say, I wish my parents knew this stuff. Like, finally, I feel like somebody understands who I am and how I'm feeling. And I want to try and do more of that. I want to be somebody who can give resources to other people who are advocating. I want to finish the book that I started. I just like to get that message out more, so that perhaps we can actually nurture this next generation and ourselves to be our best, and to help this world be the best place that it can, and try and solve some of our problems, but rather than create more.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. I think it's fantastic how when you were younger, you would go and buy clothes by feel first. And now you've come to this place where you're encountering life and making judgment calls based on how does it feel, not what's the box, how does it look. You're coming back to how does it feel. So
That's true. That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, you're full circle. This is a nice place you're at now. And I'm thankful you're here. You're part of this wonderful growing group, and you're also part of the academy.
Yeah.
And just thankful that you've connected, and Shelley introduced you, and yeah, it's beautiful. The mission you have is beautiful. Do you have any links after you can put in comments, or after I tag you?
I can.
You should link your TEDx talk here.
Yeah, I can do that. And I've been working on some things, but not quite there, I think. But definitely the TEDx talk, and just my Facebook profile, probably, I guess, as I share a fair bit of things there.
I'll tag you.
But I want to develop some of that. So that's my next steps.
Well, you're in the right place. You're going to get all sorts of inspirational ideas.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm loving it already. Thank you for what you're building here.
Yeah, I get as much out of it as everybody else, just listening to people like you tell your story, and just hear where you've been and what you're learning, and the nuggets you've gleaned from life. And even what you say, you've come back to feeling your way through life. Emotions and feelings matter. They're indicators, and you're coming back to learning to feel, incorporating feeling into navigating life. That right there. Yeah. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for the interview. I appreciate it.
If you've been listening or watching Empower Network TV, you've been listening to Heidi Haas just laid out for us. Thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability, Heidi. Thanks for being a beacon. And I understand why people are reaching out to you. So we'll look forward to seeing your link here. After I'll tag you, and okay, we'll chat soon.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Amos.
Okay. Thanks,
Heidi. Take care.